Ladies and gentlemen, imagine something for me real quick. Imagine that you're a grandmaster. I know. Even I would have to imagine such a thing. Now, bear with me for a second. Imagine that you are a grandmaster playing in a tournament, and you've had a bit of a rough year. You've lost some rating points over the course of maybe the last year or two. Okay, you're looking for a comeback tournament. Now imagine that despite having a bad year, you play 7 games, and you win all 7 of those games. All 7. 7 games, 7 wins. Now, you're not playing against people half your rating. You are playing people who are your rating or higher. You have a 3,100 rated performance, meaning you are the strongest player in the entire universe who is a human being. Well, in this video, I am going to take you through the recent games of one grandmaster named Alexander Donchenko, who is a German grandmaster playing in the French Team Championship. It's a tournament, obviously, in France. There's a bunch of different teams, a lot of different players. And he beat some of the world's best, including guys like Andrei Yesipenko, rated 2,700. I'm going to take you through all his games, the highlights, the lowlights, of which there were almost none, and we're going to have a great time. I mean, amazing performances should absolutely not be ignored. And tomorrow, obviously, the candidates begin, so we will be focusing on that. In his first round game, Donchenko began and played into a Nimzo-Indian variation, e3, castles bishop d2, and by like move 8, move 9, these guys were so far out of theory. As we can see from this opening, black is trying to fight back on the queen side, white is trying to completely grasp the center, and that is exactly where his knight moves at this very moment. It's kind of nice that black hasn't developed his knight yet. I think Yesipenko has played this with white and with black recently. He trades the bishops, and Donchenko goes into c6, and he goes into c6 with one intention and one intention only, which is to take the bishop. Okay, and now, of course, he should castle because he hasn't done that yet. Now here, if anybody's better, it's nobody. Nobody's better. It's relatively equal position, and this bishop is pretty passive. You know, the queen might go out this way, might go out that way, still not so clear. Obviously, that's a little bit of a target. You're trying to see what happens with these pawns, who takes who. If I'm playing with black, I don't really want to do that because then my queenside knight is really restricted. I do like the fact that there's some tension in the middle. So Donchenko begins to route his knight the other way and maybe open that side of the board for his bishop, his rook, maybe his queen. Knight to e4, takes, and Donchenko does exactly that. I mean, he just plants his bishop on a5 because what are you going to do? That bishop really didn't have much of a role in the game until that point. Now he offers an exchange of knights, and you might ask yourself, Levy, how did he win this game? I mean, it's very balanced, right? Well, what if I told you he won in the next 5 moves? Yeah, what? Okay, well, let's see what happens. Rook b8. I don't see any blunders there yet. b4. C takes b4. A takes b4. Now, at this point, if you take with the knight, it looks like you simply win a pawn. You're not wrong. You do win a pawn. But Donchenko had an idea here, and I suppose his idea was the move rook b1. And rook b1 is an interesting idea. Obviously, you just create an attack on the knight, but it's a little bit worse than that. If black simply retreats, then what you do is you take, and then play bishop to b4. The knight stops defending that square. You pin the rook to the queen. So rook b1 is a little bit of an annoying move for sure, but black can guard this by moving this rook, like to d7, for example. Rook back to d7, doubling up on that file, and then that knight has really good support. At this point, white might play a move like queen g4, still trying to attack this knight. Black will play this move, and it's a tense battle for this horse. However, Yesipenko played the move rook to a6. Rook to a6 targets the bishop, right? Queen a4 not only defends the bishop, but also threatens the knight again. And in this position, black has only one move. The threat here by white, like for example, if black plays h6, is to take the knight. That's just the threat. And you can take it with the bishop, for example, because that also attacks the queen. If the queen goes to f8, this is the best move. The point is that after rook takes b4 or bishop takes b4, for example, you take the queen and you win this because it's now defended. You win the bishop back, right? When the queen was on e7, it wasn't defended. So bishop takes would get away. Instead, Yesipenko played this move. And that's a pretty fancy move. Because if you take it, I take this. But Danchenko just took the knight with the queen. And black resigned. 2,700 with black. Resign the game. Because the point is, if you take, I take the queen for free now. And if you take me, I go here. Yesipenko has been having a rough month. I think he's lost something like 30 rating points or 40 rating points since he was at his peak. For obvious reasons. If you're unaware of global events. It seems like that's what's affecting him the most. I think he hasn't been able to return home. I think he's been living somewhere different in Europe. It seems like that's the case. But yeah, we hope for him to bounce back. I mean, just crazy. Just resign because he's lost the knight. I guess he totally forgot that the knight could be taken by the queen. When you win games like this, sometimes things begin to really align. And in the second round of the French Team Championship, Danchenko was playing his second lowest rated opponent. I mean, it happens, right? You're playing in the teams. You don't know who you're going to play against. He's playing Ezra Kirk, an international master from England. But I have to put the UK flag for England because for some reason, when I put England, we get this flag, and that's not the English flag. I don't know. It's been a funny glitch for some time. Sometimes you all tell me where the flag is from, but I don't know. It's like a territory or something. I don't exactly remember. Anyway, in this game we have a Catalan, which for a grandmaster against an international master is like a really good weapon because you challenge their theoretical knowledge and you try to get them in a positional squeeze, or you try to get them into an endgame. And in this game, Ezra Kirk came prepared with an ultra main line. Taking a6, knight c6, and you want to play rook b8 to step off of this diagonal and then play the move b5. White plays e3, knight f back to d2, the point being that now b5 is not possible, so black instead plays e5. We take the knight, we get rid of the light squared bishop, but we win our pawn back, and then we also win this pawn as well. So black goes from being up a pawn to being down a pawn, but having the bishop pair and having attacking prospects with moves like h5. And visually, this looks quite nice, but actually, if you know your theory, which rest assured that Danchenko does, he plays all the best moves. f3 is the best move to kick the knight out. Black plays this absurd rook move attacking the knight. We take the knight, they take our knight, we take the bishop, they take our queen, we take their queen, they take our knight. And we play bishop to d2. And up until this moment, targeting the pawn on c7, the players had been following the game. Dingley Ren, Shahryar Mamediyarov, 2017, in a blitzer rapid game in a tournament in China. I think Danchenko knew that. I actually think he knew that. Now, it's not that difficult to find the move bishop a5 over the board if you haven't seen it before, because you just attack the pawn. It's actually not guardable. In that game, Mamediyarov played bishop c5, counterattacking this pawn, and went on to lose the game. Not because he played that move, just because this is a difficult line. In this game, Ezra Kirk played more passively, giving up this pawn and choosing to activate his rook like this. Excuse me. Danchenko has a same color bishop endgame with rooks, where he is a pawn up. And let's see him go to work. Let's see if he's able to win the game. So first of all, he offers a trade of rooks and actually threatens to really improve his structure. Like, that would be a massive improvement. His e-pawns right now don't scare anybody, okay? They just don't. It's like bowling, right? I mean, like, the pins are like this. You got to roll a straight ball, all right? And I don't know a whole lot about bowling, but it's not the easiest thing in the world. And also, black is trying to fight back with kind of a split structure here. So Danchenko now brings back his bishop and is activating his king. Very important. But he's given up the pawn, right? He's given up the pawn. And black has done a very decent job here of actually getting down to this endgame. So credit to Ezra, because he played great. I mean, he's been playing great. But you kind of know the spoiler of the video. Like, you can't, right? Like, you know that Danchenko's won every game, in case I have to remind you. So how the heck do you do that? Well, I love this play by Ezra, like giving up the c pawn for the b pawn. If you take on c4 and allow this, you're never gonna win because you're forked. You might play rook a4, rook h2, rook a6. Like, the more pawns that fall off the board, the lower and lower chance you have of winning. So what is Danchenko gonna do? How is he gonna win this? Well, I like the fact that he's left this pawn sort of isolated, okay? And he's going to find a way. Yep, he's going to try to get that 2-on-1 on the queen side. But Ezra forces a pawn trade, and now the a-pawn is gone, giving him a passed a-pawn. But Danchenko's still not done harassing his opponent, right? Trying to infiltrate. We have fg, rook g6, pawns are falling. But now that h-pawn, who's going to guard that h-pawn? Clearly, Ezra can play the move g5 here, giving up that pawn, but winning that pawn. And if h3, you can just follow the pawn. You can probably give a check first and then go follow the pawn. But he plays a5. And he goes all in. He goes all in with the a pawn. He gives up the pawn. It's now 3-on-2. The pawn's going all the way. And the threat is check and promotion. So the king has to hide. Is this a draw or is white winning? King b3. Uh-oh. Wait a minute. I can still win the e-pawn. Rook a2, rook e4. Is this a winning endgame or is this still a draw? Let's see. Rook d2. Great move. Cutting off the king. Very important. Don't let the king get close. Now we push our own pawn. So what happened here? Apparently, rook h4 had to be played. And after c4, you had to go back. This maneuver to get back to the 8th rank was the final moment that black could have drawn this game. Why? Because if white plays c5, then black recuts off the king. And now the king cannot cross the middle. And if the pawn moves to c6, the king just hangs out. That's the only draw maneuver. The only draw maneuver is to go out, back, fake the pawn moving forward, okay? Fake out, cut the king off, and just hang around. And white can't make any more progress. For example, if I wait, okay, rook h6, you push too far, I immediately win your pawn. And if you defend, my king gets close. Your rook can't cut me off anymore, right? And like, let's say I play king b4, let's not forget this pawn is hanging the whole time as well, right? So, I could take that pawn maybe, but not right now, because maybe even right now. Maybe even right now, and then I get back in time. But that was the only drawing maneuver, and because he played aggressively with his pawn, now in trying to be active, he loses the game. And Danchenko's pressure ultimately pays off as his king and pawn march up the board together, and there's nothing that can be done here. I mean, check, king b7, c7. So black had to be super precise to save this game, and he was unable to find it. Good pressure, ultimately paying off. And in this game, Danchenko was rewarded with something I call Grandmaster bonus, all right? An IM would not have beaten a GM like that, but a GM will beat an IM like that. The pressure will pay off, and the level difference at some point will prove itself. I have no doubts that Ezra Kirk is an extremely strong player. I don't really know much about the guy, but it happens. All right, game number 3. Now, Danchenko has the black pieces. We'll look at it from his perspective versus very strong Grandmaster. Arturs Nixons from Latvia. This one was a very imbalanced bishop b5 check Sicilian, delaying the move d4 just for a moment. And we get a queen takes d4, bishop takes d7, variation of this bishop b5 check Sicilian. Knight c3, and as early as like move 9, almost no games, which is quite surprising. You'll notice that there is a big hole in the black position on d5. That is why white wants to go here, put that knight on the e3 square through f1, and have a dominant clamp. All right, and what does black want to do? Fight back with the bishop that he has that white does not have, and exotic moves like h5. All right, we're gonna have some fun. I mean, when this is the position after 10 moves, someone will lose. That's just, someone will lose. I don't know if it's gonna be white. Well, I do know who it's going to be, but you also know who it's going to be. But how? All right, bishop back to e6. So this pawn's marched out kind of far. Now, does white wanna allow that? Does white wanna play h3 himself? Nixons wants to play h3 himself. Now, queen f6, very interesting decision here. Offering a trade of queens. We are now going to have, this is still a middle game. Just because queens have been traded, only a queen and a piece has been traded. This is still a middle game. This is not an end game. White castles queenside. And in this position, oh, something really interesting happens. Danchenko plays rook takes knight. Whoa, this is the Sicilian at its very best. The sacrifice on the knight on c3, relinquishing the defense of the center of the board, and Danchenko has a knight and a pawn for a rook. But he also has much more central presence now. He has very good pressure on the weakened king side of white, and he has a lot more pawns, right? So let's see what he can do. At the end of the day, it's 4 pieces versus 4 pieces. But the relative value of these rooks is not 5 points. You're not going to tell me this rook is a 5-point rook. It's a 3.5-point rook. It's a 4-point rook. All right? Bishop g5, b3, and a couple moves later, the next exchange happens. Bishop takes knight, relieving the pressure on the d5 square. breaking apart the structure a little bit more and creating an opposite colored bishop situation, right? And a potential weakness. f6, stability on the dark squares, making sure the king is safe, and now g5. So black is trying to use that pawn majority. King to g6. And the more you look around this position, the more it becomes clear white has 0 targets. 0 targets. Only one person can win this game. Danchenko. Unless, of course, he like hangs a rook. But, you know, in your case, white, black, and the spectators can win this game, okay? But yeah, I mean, Nixon's like cannot do anything. The computer just wants him to move back and forth and wait for black to do something. He plays c4. At its core, that is a loss of a pawn. Like, takes. But Nixon's does that because he has rooks, right? He wants to activate the rooks. I mean, okay, he wants to not lose that rook first, but that is what he wants to do. He wants the rooks on the open file. Did he have to play c4? Maybe the team situation demanded it. I don't really know, but this is a nightmare position for white. I mean, he has legitimately no moves. You might say, well, why didn't he play rook c1 and then c4? Well, because then he was going to play rook c8. So Nixon's decides that I'm going to sacrifice a pawn, play rook g1, and then I'm going to activate my rook. But king f6, bishop c6 to kick you out. You can't even get in. Like, let's say you play the move rook d8. That looks smart, but then you very quickly realize you have 2 pawns here that once they fall, it's an avalanche. So you shouldn't do that either. And Danchenko still has a pawn majority. He will continue to march down that board. King f5. And now we have this trade. But folks, I just mentioned the g2 pawn, right? Now, to his credit, he is fighting back. He's not just... But now he has no more checks. And now the pawns are going to begin falling when the checks are done. There they go. And when the pawns fall, both can fall. But even the f-pawn can promote. And you give a couple of more checks. The king runs to safety. Beautiful move, g4. I'm not sure it was necessary. I think you could have just played knight e4, but maybe Danchenko did not want to lose all his pawns. Maybe he didn't want to lose that, but he has knight f3 there anyway. But instead of that, I mean, black just makes a queen. And I think just for fun, Nixon's being a good sport, got 1 square away from promotion, a couple of checks, and resigned the game in this position because the king can move and mate will be, the promotion will just be stopped. So this might have been the best game Danchenko ever played. Like, I don't know. I don't know what his database of games looks like, but that was beautiful. I mean, rook takes c3, just an exchange sacrifice, beautiful. I mean, honestly, just winning like a beautiful game in the style of, I don't know, one of the greats who would sacrifice exchanges for positional advantages. I don't know, Petrosian, like, you know, just beautiful game. Beautiful. Amazing game. What can you possibly say? And there's 4 more. That's the amazing part. Okay, this might be the most impressive opponent that Danchenko beat. Arjun Erigaisi, who is at his peak right now. Erigaisi, one of the top juniors in the world, pushing for the 2700 club, and a King's Indian defense, a sideline of the King's Indian defense, e5, knight a6, not knight c6, doesn't really matter. This is really kind of like the starting position. Black has given up the light squared bishop because this light squared bishop is kind of garbage. Black is going to put a knight on c5, play a5 to prevent b4, rotate this knight backwards, and let the fun begin. And all of those things begin happening, right? The knight rotates back. The bishop goes to the center. Knight has to go back because the queen's hanging, but, you know, knight goes here, a5, right? And this is now another moment in this game. The queen moves out of the way. Now white plays g3. The point of g3 is you're going to go bishop g2 and kick the bishop out, then play e5, so this bishop is no longer garbage, right? Maybe black will play a4 at some point. Super fluid position with chances for both sides. There it is, the bishop back to g2. Let's trade bishops. No, thank you. Now my knight is going to go to the middle, and I'm going to go to the d3 square. Danchenko's like, no, you're not, because if you do, I'll take you with the rook. So Erigaisi goes queen b6. Knight back to a3. Let's trade knights. Erigaisi's like, all right, I'll take that trade because I still have good control of the dark squares. Bishop e5. I'm back. Queen d2. Queen b4. Look at this. Trying to completely infiltrate on the queen side. Like, that trade would lose the game for white almost. Right? Because you would open up the rook. So rook e2. No, we can't trade. Knight e6. All right, let's trade queens like this. And now Erigaisi plays a4. Beautiful game so far by Erigaisi. I mean, making the King's Indian look amazing. But b4. Wait, is my guy Danchenko about to sacrifice another rook? No. No. He allows the fork because the bishop stops defending d6. So he makes a calculated Wait, excuse me? He's not taking the pawn on d6? No. He wants this, and then I guess his idea is to go for that pawn. He wants to soften up the structure so that his bishop can come alive. That's very interesting. He wants something like rook b7 and getting this position because the structure is like loose, right? Like now he can get to these pawns faster. Very interesting decision. Erigaisi doesn't like that very much, so he plays d... Whoa. 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 What the heck is going on here? Actually, seriously, what the heck is going on here? Wait. Is this a broadcast error? Huh? What? Why did he take the rook? I'm so confused. What? Okay, there must be a broadcast error here because that doesn't make any sense. I think probably this happened, right? This was the position. This must be the position. There is no way. Yeah, and then, okay. So probably it was rook d6, bishop b4, rook d7, bishop c5. What? Oh my God, I've never seen that before. What the heck is this? What happened to the digital board? This is insanity. Wow, aren't you glad you're 21 minutes into the video and you have the attention span? That is insane. Okay, wow. I mean, I was hyping up his move. I was like, oh, wow, rook d, maybe this was his idea. Nope, absolutely that. No, he took on d6. That was what I thought. Okay, crazy. All right, let's just proceed like nothing happened. Bishop e3, fe3. I mean, I suppose Erigaisi wanted to play knight c5 to fork, but then I guess he didn't want to lose this pawn. Wow. I saw that, I was like, crazy. Anyway, I'm as surprised as you are. Rook and bishop endgame versus rook and knight. Let's get back on track. White has a couple of big weaknesses, but these weaknesses are also very significant. And there's going to be one thing that really decides the game here. It's going to be the pawns, right? Because if knight versus bishop get traded, at some point, some of these pawns are going to die as well. If the bishop finds a way to get active in a way that the knight is not really useful, that also will win the game. So e5. There we go. Bishop c6, bishop a4 is the idea. Erigaisi goes all in. Tries to get to the second rank. We lose a pawn, and he's just investing in the a pawn. Rook a7, rook e2, bishop e8. Very tricky move. Now knight g5 to get to f3. Why didn't you play knight g5, by the way? I guess I don't know. Knight f3 looks quite good. Knight h3 also looks quite good. But okay, he plays this. Bishop f7. And I guess Erigaisi here just went for the a pawn. Like he sacked it and went for the a pawn. And the idea here is that if c5, there's rook e1 check, and then a1. And if king f1, there's rook b2, and rook b1, and a1. And what Erigaisi missed is that there's this. And the point is that after king e8, the rook gets to the first rank. So I'm assuming they had low time, right? I'm assuming rook f1, rook f7, rook f1, he missed it in low time. So, a lot of, so far, a couple of these games by Danchenko was just very consistent accuracy throughout the game and better endurance. Like just outlasting some of his opponents in these endgames, staying sharper 40, 50 moves into the game, even against a guy like Erigaisi, who is super good. So 4 out of 4, we move to round number 5. In this game and the next game, we have two opponents who are slightly weaker than the others. I think Clovis Verne, I'm probably pronouncing that incorrectly, maybe Vernay, is 25-20 rated GM from France. I've actually never heard of Vernay. So I was like, oh my gosh. But it's just amazing how many strong players there are in the world. Now this game was also a King's Indian, but this time Danchenko playing black. A c5 structure King's Indian with an early e6, ed5. This is known as a Benoni structure. And you'll notice that bishop h6 is not possible because there's queen h4 check with knight takes e4 being the idea, right? Queen h4 check. Yeah, that, I mean, you can play it, but he didn't do it. And for 17 moves of this game, folks, these guys followed the game between Dreyev and Kasparov. Knight h5, queen f6, this entire plan, all the way to this point, Kasparov was playing with the black pieces. Again, I don't know if Danchenko knew all of that. Kasparov played bishop d7 and then took the knight, but Danchenko plays b5. Kasparov's move was better. Shocking. The point of b5 is that you allow en passant, but then you play rook b8, bishop d7, you get the knight, and then you get b6. That's the idea here. You also have this interesting idea. Now, that looks like a free pawn. It ain't, because the bishop hangs, right? So b3, now we still take the bishop, and now we drop back to d7. Queen b5. And white is just trying to desperately hang on to b6. We try to go win the pawn back. We do, but not without losing this pawn. But now we have tactics. We get out of the pin with a hit on the queen and defend it, right? So takes. Danchenko is still a pawn down, but it's the King's Indian. There's really no such thing as being a pawn down in the King's Indian. If white plays the move bishop c7 here, there is a beautiful idea by black to play bishop a6 and counter shot. And if white moves this, we're going to play bishop d3, and these bishops are just psychos, all right? So bishop takes on d6. In this game, white is the one sacrificing the exchange, and Danchenko has to fight back with his two rooks. Knight c3, rook back to b7, and now here comes the king, courageously running to the middle of the board to help everybody. Bishop d4, king goes to defend the queen side. Rook a6. The craziest thing about this position is that it's still equal. It's still a very complicated game, okay? But probably low time as always, right? Move 35, 40. That's when time pressure starts to begin, and something very tragic happens here. White goes back to e2 to target the bishop, and all of a sudden, this bishop starts gasping for air after king f7. Now, if you play the move d6 here, your bishop is just gone. It's not a matter of losing the bishop. It's a matter of the fact that you're playing without a piece. You're just playing without a piece. You locked away your own bishop, right? So instead of that, Clovis tries to take on d4 and bring the bishop out. Now, why he didn't go to a3, I'm assuming there is this check deflecting the king, and then rook takes a4, and then that. But even if you play bishop c5, unfortunately, your pieces meet the same tragic fate. And he had to resign, and Danchenko won yet another game of chess. You know, the amazing thing about this game is that, like, again, it was just kind of consistent accuracy, sharpness, endurance throughout this game. I mean, first of all, you play the first 17 moves like Garry Kasparov. You know what I mean? I feel like the chess gods just smile on you at that point, okay? So, 5 out of 5. Well, that's only 5 games. He won 2 more games, which is completely insane. So he had a really long game against Lucas Di Nicolantonio, which sounds like the most Italian name of all time. I don't know how this guy has the French flag. I guess he's French. This was a very long game. This was a semi-Slav Miran, but also not really a semi-Slav because Danchenko went here and didn't play knight c3, which is normally what happens. The opening is not the most important thing in the world. White tries to play for e4. Black tries to play for these 2 breaks. There's e4. And there's c5. And we have this position. White has a3 on 2. We are going to see the intricate dance of the pawns and the pieces. Okay? Queen c2, b6, trying to develop the bishop. Bishop g5, pressuring this and that. h6. Okay, why are we giving this check? What is the big idea? I guess deflecting the king from the defense of this. Like maybe the king is worse on h8 than it is on g8. We come back. We cannot get taken. And now we have bishop f4, okay? Bishop b7, very interesting idea. If you take, I take. So we have rook d1, queen e7, takes, rook b7. And white is slightly better. Why is white slightly better? Because white has a 3 on 2. That is it. White has a 3 on 2. So in all endgames, white is happier, and white has a little bit more pressure on that side of the board, and well, that's not what was played in the game. This is what was played in the game. So white's pieces are slightly more active, and the prospects are better on that side of the board. And now we begin a dance of pieces. For the next, like, 10 moves, nobody moves a pawn. Queen e2, knight back to d7. We don't want to trade knights. We repeat once. We jump back this way. The knight continues to jump. Now, Danchenko doesn't even trade yet. He plays queen f3 and invites a trade of rooks. So the rooks get traded. He tries to control the entire d-file. There is now no knight d7. Rook d8, you would take and take. And given that that is the threat, the king goes to defend the pawn. White plays the move h3. Now we offer a trade of rooks. We decline a trade of rooks. And now for another long while, we don't play a pawn move until we play the move b4. And there it is. White is trying to make use of his 3-on-2. All right, bishop e3. Black tries to fight back in the middle. Here comes b5, e4. All right, queen e2. And now we have a situation where if black sits back and does nothing, white will play a4 and just slowly, like, for example, king h8, a4, king g8, a5. I told you, 3-on-2 is a nightmare to deal with, especially when you have a knight like this, a bishop like this. So black begins trying to fight back and creating tactics. Gives up a7 completely, takes on c4. All right, gives up b6 completely, tries to get active and create threats on the white king, right? Knight d6. All right, the b pawn has been lost, but white now remains with an a pawn and a knight versus bishop situation. If you play bishop f4, there's queen a1 check. So you don't exactly win material there. Still, he plays it, but check here, and Danchenko just has to use his a-pawn. Queen d5. He's now giving up the a-pawn in order to win this pawn and the f7 pawn. And that's what happens. Here, for the life of me, I don't understand why black didn't go here. Yeah, I guess he didn't like maybe queen d5 or something, but he allows this. So he just loses a pawn and tries to hold the position in this fashion. And for the many time in a row now, we see Danchenko outlasting his opponents and just playing much sharper, more accurately toward the end. This was the incorrect plan, it would seem, to go knight to f1, because that allowed the king to get close. And now if you go back to d2, there is a move that deflects the queen, which is check. Brutal. Takes, check again, you lose this. So queen to d1, check here, and a brutal final move. The knight is stuck. It can now no longer escape. So queen c1, discovered check on e3, takes, and now you prevent the knight from running with bishop to e5. That is a very painful conclusion to the game, as the knight cannot escape, and Danchenko is 6 out of 6. And the final game that I have for you is nothing short of brutal. And if you had the patience to watch it, be happy that you did, because this is a game against Jordan van Forest, who is very strong, but also having a little bit of a rough patch. This was a Sicilian, a Najdorf Sicilian, and it was a poison pawn variation, which is a very popular line where black takes on b2. It's a tremendous amount of theory, but after rook b1, queen a3, there are two moves, and they are e5 and f5. Jordan plays bishop e2, which is seldom played, and it delays the move f5 for a while, but the entire idea is to drive the knight into e6 and sack it completely. Jordan plays an insane variation, and he basically is gambling that black doesn't remember all of the theory. That is what he's doing. Because something this sharp, you cannot play unless you know everything, and you're hoping they don't know, much back. But generally speaking, if black knows the theory and the Najdorf, all of it, then they either aren't worse or are simply better, right? So that's just how it works. Like if you play just a completely insane variation, the alternative, like I said, to playing bishop e2 is you have to play e5 or f5 straight away. Those are the two moves. So he delays it. He plays this line where you just sack this very, and this looks terrifying, right? I mean, like this looks very scary. Like you can play knight b6 here. I don't know. I don't even know what the line here is. I think there's a line where like white sacks a rook. And the point is that if you take like this, there's like the queen. I mean, this is, yeah, I don't know. Instead of that though, Danchenko just castles. Like he just gives back the knight and has this position. Rook takes on b7. And now we have insane tactics. Knight g4. So we have a rook that can take a bishop. We have two rooks that can see each other. We have a queen and a knight that are staring at the king. The bishop sees the bishop. The queen sees the bishop. The bishop sees this bishop as well, right? So h3. Okay, we have rook takes f1, bishop f1, and now rook f8. The threat is, of course, to take the bishop. Now, a sane person moves the bishop out of the way, maybe even taking a pawn. Why not, right? The bishops still see each other. The knight is still hanging. That bishop sees that bishop. The queen guards this, but then the queen sees that. I mean, everybody, it's like a tense standoff, right? Jordan here calculates pawn takes knight, okay? Allowing this. Now that looks very scary, but queen g1 doesn't actually do too much because the king runs out. King runs out, there's nothing there. Bishop g5 check, maybe you, bishop g5, you have rook b8 check maybe. And then the king actually just keeps hiding. The king is somehow safe after this. So I think what Jordan might have flipped in his mind was the check. Because Danchenko doesn't have to give him the check first. He can go here. And there's a major difference. Because if you play rook b8 now, then after this hangs. The queen is still here. It never went to g1, right? So because we play bishop g5, queen g5, now this check is a completely different story. Because you never managed to play rook b8, which means in this position, I can just play h6, and I'm threatening check, right? Like I have a check anytime I want it, but it's worse. I'm also threatening this check. I'm also threatening this check, depending on where your queen goes. So for example, like let's say your queen goes to e7, I have queen e3, you play king h2, I have queen f4, and you're simply getting mated. Like this check is okay, but the king will run, and then maybe I can still mate you with rook g1. But I have all these threats after the move h6, and my king now is completely safe. And Jordan just resigns. 23 moves with black, Danchenko wins. Sometimes in chess, when it goes right, it goes so right. This man, 3,100 performance. He is gaining 30 rating points. 33! At that level, that is unheard of. That is crazy. And his team obviously qualified for something. They're going to keep on playing. So we're going to see how many games in a row he can win. Folks, tomorrow is the candidates. Thanks for hanging out with me. I will see you all right back here tomorrow for epic chess content as we begin a 14-round, 8-player, double round robin to determine who will play Magnus for the World Championship. Peace out. Get out of here.